Going on, guys? Kyger here, and today we're talking about the third raid in Summoner's War Chronicles. I'm going to tell you all about how to beat Naraka, the dragon on Boiling Waterfall. We're going to talk about what units you need to bring, what mechanics you got to watch out for, and even show you how to skip the phases entirely. Let's get into it. Alright, so in front of us we have Boiling Waterfall Naraka, level 67. He has the normal boss weakness, immune to most CCs, and the thing that you mostly have to watch out for is Dragon Roar. Naraka wraps hard scales around his body and removes all harmful effects, so normally a lot of people put a bunch of debuffs on him and try to wail on him, so he's going to get rid of everything. When it prepares itself for a powerful attack, it periodically applies Dragon's Breath, which is a whole new mechanic, to all enemies within the area. If Naraka isn't stopped, it will roar and drop multiple fireballs from the sky. The fireballs deal damage based on Dragon Breath level and leaves debris continuously applying Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath is a purple debuff that does percentage damage per second, and it stacks just like everything up to level 10, so it can deal more percentage per second, and it cannot be cleansed or gotten rid of. It can only go away if you heal to full HP while you have Dragon's Breath. The issue comes in when you have cannot be healed, which will be not right here, Dragon Scales. Well, it actually comes from the jump, breath, fireball, earthquake. Okay, here it is. So he goes through these phases where he jumps down. I will explain this when it happens. And he does earthquake. Deal damage that increases based off of Dragon's Breath level and pushes enemies back and applies unrecoverable. Then he goes into what we just saw, the Dragon's Roar, where he builds up for his big hit that's going to do a bunch of damage across the board, leave a bunch of fire on the ground, and puts Dragon's Breath per second on everyone around him. So you need to get rid of the unrecoverable and heal while still trying to DPS him down. Now, this doesn't sound too bad during these DPS checks. The issue comes in when we have Dragon's Scale. Naraka wraps himself with hard scales on its body, as you'll see from over here. Dragon's Roar says Dragon's Scales. So during Dragon's Roar, he has Dragon's Scale, applying unremovable invincibility to himself. Invincibility will disappear once Naraka's HP falls below a certain ratio. Now, how do you DPS someone who is invincible? There are units that can do damage through beneficial effects, such as the new Fire Raven we were given, Lupinus, the Green Magic Knight, the Black Cowgirl, who is now in the secret rooms. And units like that is generally how you're going to go through the Dragon Scale. It does not say it right here, but as of the recording of this video, this has been changed to match the Korean server, which says that all other damage is reduced by 99%, meaning 1% of damage from your summoner will still go through. Ideally, you're going to want to put a lot of buffs, debuffs on your units that can go through the scale and try to beat it through the DPS checks. During one of these phases, he will summon these adds, these elementals, and they're going to run over and they're going to try to beat up these bases, and you got to kill them. Something to keep note of is they have a passive, Dragon's Blessing. The fire spirits are engulfed by the protection of fire. The protection disappears when they're exposed to CC effects. So they have an HP bar, and they have an extra HP bar, which is a barrier. You can chew through that barrier. You can ignore it with units that we talked about before, like Raven, whatnot, that ignores beneficial effects. They can go right through the barrier, or you can use a CC effect. May it be cleaves, stuns, provokes, things like that. and there's big groups of them, and you gotta deal with them. Now let's get into the actual gameplay and explain it as it goes. All right, so you'll see on our team, our two allies have the same exact team, making it pretty simple. They both have Anavel, which has a heal as well as a cleanse to get rid of the unrecoverable. They both are using Bastet for shields and attack buff, and they're both using Raven to ignore the dragon's defense. This was recorded about a week ago. It took me a while to get to these videos. I apologize. Myself, I am using Wusa, the blue pioneer, who applies heal recovery and invincibility for some mechanics. Doesn't work in a lot of the mechanics, but it's continuous recovery, which is going to work really good against the dragon's breath, because it applies the dragon's breath every second, and continuous recovery heals you every second, so it cancels out. Then we have Raven, who ignores the debuffs. That ignores the beneficial effects. And we have Shannon, that gives our whole team attack and defense buff, as well as giving attack down, defense down to the dragon. A big boon that I got a couple days after this recording, you can use the Black Harpy to do damage up, damage up, defense down, and really make that happen. We also have Orbia that can do defense downs, and we have Kina, who can do attack speed bonus to the team, which will affect all three Ravens, whose basic attacks can ignore beneficial effects. So we come over to the dragon, and then first he's going to drop some fire balls on the ground, and then also fear. Now if we take a look, he shoots them up, and then you see right behind us that circle. That's going to be the fireball. It's going to do initial damage when it lands, and it's also going to leave fire on the ground that does damage over time, and also applies that dragon's breath. We will also immediately get feared. If you time your dodge correctly, you can ignore said fear, which will be important in speed clearing. And right now is a sort of a DPS check, you can look at it that way. And what's happening is we just get to wail on him. His stomp doesn't really matter, you can just ignore it. And sometimes he does a few directional attacks. You want to make sure your monsters are on whistle to follow you around to dodge said mechanics, and you want to wail on them. If you're trying to, why I say this is a DPS check is if you can get him down low enough, at 8 bars he will start to do the next phase, but you can actually, during that transition, you can chunk him down to 7 or 6. And then during the shield break, if you bring him down far enough, about 40 to 50%, I don't know the exact number, it's 50 to 40%, then he just never summons the ads, which a lot of people wipe on. And we'll explain that as we get to it. So we're just wailing on him. I'm saving mana. And you see we have attack speed buff from Kina. We have attack up from Bastet. And then he just did a fire breath that does initial damage and also puts dragon's breath on us. He just did the slam. As you see, we all have unrecoverable, but we have 2 Anavels on our team. So we want to group up so we all benefit from the Bastet and the Shannon. And you'll see Dragon's Roar right here. A powerful Dragon Roar skill is activated when you fail to penetrate through the dragon scale and deal 3% of his HP. So during this loading bar, we need to deal at least 3% of his HP. Now what's interesting here, you see we immediately have 4 defense downs. That's from my Shannon, from Orbia, and from the Orbia as well. What we have here is he just cleansed himself, and now we're initially putting on debuffs. If you want to go for a speed clear and ignore the add phase, you take this one slow, build up your mana, get going, try to get close to your ultimate, and then once the shield breaks and he's on the ground, which we'll see in a moment, then you wail on him and get him low enough so he never transitions. If we take a look, going through it, you see invulnerable, but we're still doing a little bit of damage. His HP bar is going down. He's going to get up very shortly. And then right now, he's going into the add phase. And you see he's at 67.83% HP. If he got down to, I believe it's 50%, maybe 40, I could be wrong, but I believe it's 50%, this phase never happens. He just goes into the next Dragon Shield, which will then be 5%, then 7% damage checks. So this phase is where it happens. And I maneuvered my camera to show you this in a certain way. So directly in front of me is the entrance that you came from. A lot of people are calling that the entrance north, this south. And what happens here is you have waves of those monsters going for our towers. On the left, front left side, there's a tower. On the front right side, there's a tower. And directly behind me, there is a tower. And the one in the middle is the easy one because it does not have a first wave. What you can then do, which I didn't do in this one, I learned it afterwards, is you can start in the middle like my ally is doing right now and use, especially if you are a cleaf, you can do an AoE CC such as the fire first skill or the fire third skill for a stun or taunt, immediately breaking the shields on both initial waves, going towards the units. So now you want to change your target system to focus, which I do sort of late. I'm mostly worried about trying to show you what's going on, not doing my stuff super correctly. I change it, and now I'm on focus. My units are focused, and you see just taking down the elementals one by one. I hit them with the first skill or third skill, breaking their shield, which is the white bar. Most of my damage is focused on my Raven, who is just clobbering them like no one's business. And the dragon messes with you during this time. As you saw, he just came by, did a fire breath. He also lobs fireballs. And then what you want to do, I trusted my teammates during this time, is you want to, once your wave is done, you want to look around and see if you can help someone out. Remember, anyone can wipe this for you. And then you go to any of the three. If so, the elementals go to your base, the three bases, and attack it. If one base is destroyed, you were fine. If two bases are destroyed, you lose, because he does a big, powerful one-shot mechanic in a moment. This is also a good time, as you see all of my units have that purple debuff on them, which is the damage over time, Dragon's Breath. This is a good time to heal, revive units, prepare, wait for cooldowns, because this is going to be a kind of lengthy mechanic right here. And then you can go any of the three. You don't have to be spread up. You see I look around, they're all dead. One of my allies came to the right to help them. The one on the right is the hardest one because it has a double wave in the beginning. And then we come over, we make contact with our buddies. You have to watch out because he leaves these fire breaths on the ground. And unfortunately for me, on my base, there was a Dragon's Breath, which is why some of my units have 3 or 4 Dragon's Breath going on, because you are invulnerable while you're on the plate, but you can still take side effects of that Dragon's Breath. And we go, and then you see So what you want to do when you're initially approaching him after this mechanic, you want to survey the area, check where the fires are at, and then match up with your team in an area where there are no fires. Then once you get a few hits in, he throws down 2 to 3 fireballs, as we see 2 right here in front of us. I believe he does one on the other side. Also does a fear, which you can also dodge through if you time it correctly. Then we get a little bit of time to do some damage to him. And then we're going to that same 3% mechanic we did earlier, but 5%. We get a little bit of time. If it takes you too long to get his HP down, he will then start doing more mechanics. You see I changed my focus of my targets to whistle, which makes them follow me so I can get away from the fires. I resisted the knockback but still got unrecoverable. And now we're going into the 5%. And I saved my ultimate for this because even though during the recording of this video I cannot damage the dragon with my ultimate, but Cleave's fire ultimate applies a level 5. You'll see the third debuff. He has 3 defense breaks, 1 unrecoverable, 1 attack down, and a level 5 resistance down from my ultimate, allowing our units to land their debuffs easier. You can, if you have 2 cleaves on the team, don't stack them up. Do 1 at the 5% and 1 at the 7%. And depending on your DPS and the rate of your mana regeneration, Kina can apply some mana regeneration for the team. You can have a cleave ultimate on the 5% and the 7%, depending on the range of your damage. Going through it, he's got some burns, got some more attack downs, more defense breaks, and Dragon's Roar has successfully been stopped. If you fail either of these, he rains down a bunch of fire, does a bunch of damage, but you can survive it. If any units die, any of your monsters, then his ultimate gauge on the top right loads up, and he does the big one-shot mechanic. You'll see some guys are standing in the fire. That's a no-no. And now we're going into the 7%. This is the main big one, and a lot of groups can't beat the 7% because they just don't have enough buffs and debuffs. That is fine. If you have enough healing and invulnerability, you can dodge and survive the big roar and flames he does. Just make sure your units do not die. Keep them on whistle, move around, and you might even be in a situation Raven likes to jump away when he uses one of his skills. I believe this is S3. He jumps back and throws daggers. He can go off in some weird locations, which will end up with him in fire. Best way to do that is keep them on whistle, obviously, but once they're on whistle, they can move around and do what they want. If you juggle your joystick or move your mouse or whatnot, then they all refocus onto you, and then they can go off and do their own thing again. But Naraka, mechanically, is not very hard. It just requires specific kind of characters. Requires a cleanser. Not all 3 players do not have to have a cleanser. Most cleansers, Lulu, Annabelle, things like that, cleanse everyone around them across all 4, 8, 12 characters on the board. A healer like Wusa right in front of us, he does continuous recovery for everyone on the team, including the other 11 characters as well. His invulnerability only applies to your team. That's fine. And then you want buffs and debuffs like buffs like Bastet, debuffs like Helia. You can even, if you're trying to do a speed team, you can do something like Wendy, the green pumpkin jack-o'-lantern. You can do things like Naomi the green cat, martial cat, who applies crit damage up to the target, and just really go ham on it with things like Crow or Naomi the green martial cat that does more damage based off of debuffs on the target. But that's it for Naraka, guys. Let me know if this helped you out. And in the next video, we're going to be talking about store updates. Let's get into it.